Good evening, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshas Vayishlach, Tavshin Pei Aleph. Yaakov meets with his brother Esav after over 20 years of separation. They meet, and Yaakov was very nervous as to what was going to be at this meeting. But when it happens, Torah tells us that Yaakov lifted his eyes. Behold, he saw Esav coming with 400 men. And he split up his family amongst, and the children amongst Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah, with their children. And the Torah tells us, Vayasem es hashvachas v'esaldeihan rishayna. Yaakov first put the maidservants and their children first. Ve'eslea biladeh achreinim, Leah and her children after them. Ve'esrachel es Yosef achreinim, and Rachel and Yosef after. So the order of how he lined them up was Bilhah and Zilpah and their children. And it's important that the Torah refers to them as shvachos, maidservants, because in essence, they were not regular wives. They were given to Yaakov as wives, both by Rachel and Leah, in order to be able to enable them to have the merit for more children. So they were never on the they weren't on the same level of wives as Rachel and Leah. They didn't have that same status, so to speak. But he put them first, and then Leah and her children, and then Rachel and her children. Yaakov passed before them, bowed down 7 times till he reached his brother. Esav ran to greet him and hugged him. He fell on his neck and kissed him. And they cried. Esav lifted his eyes and he saw the wives and the children. And Esav says to Yaakov, who are these? And Yaakov responds to Esav, these are the children that God has so graciously bestowed upon me. Now, the maidservants, they and their children approached and they bowed down. They were the first ones as they were lined up. Then it says, Vatigash kam Leah biladeh vayishtachavu. All 7 of her children approached and they bowed down. And then it says, V'achar nigash Yosef v'Rachel vayishtachavu. And after that, Yosef and Rachel approached and they bowed down. Now, the Das Akanim B'Malei Tosfos, the commentary of the Tosfos that on the Torah, makes a very interesting point, fascinating point. We go back on Pasuk, which is this is Parak Lamed Gimel, Pasuk Vav, chapter 33, verse 6. Vatigashna hashvachos heinu v'yaldeihen, the maidservants approached, they and their children. Vatishtachavena is translated as, and they bow down. But in Diktuk, in Hebrew grammar, Vatishtachavena is the feminine plural form. That not there in the plural form in Hebrew grammar, you have a feminine form, you have a masculine form. You have a form when referring to women, you have a form when referring to men. And actually, when both are together, they're described in the masculine form. But here it says the shvachas approached, they and their children, and they bow down using the feminine form. Now, Vatigash Leah biladeha. Leah and her children also approached, Vayishtachavu, and they bow down. It doesn't say Vatishtahavena, which is the feminine form. It says Vayishtachavu, and they bow down, the masculine form, referring to her and her sons. And after that, Yosef and Rachel approached, Vayishtachavu, and they bow down, masculine form. So there's an obvious question here. Why, by the maidservants, when it says they, are we using the feminine form? And when we talk about Leah and Rachel and their children, it uses the masculine form. What's the difference? So the Das Akanim says something absolutely fascinating. He writes, it's written, Batishtachavena, and they bow down, feminine form, Hashvachos. The maidservants themselves bow down. Avol yaldein loy hishtachavu. But their children didn't bow down. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, the 4 sons of the maidservants, did not bow down. Sha'amru, for they said, Imayseinu einin chashuvas kameinu. Basically, they said, our mothers who are maidservants, okay, they can bow down, but we're not going to bow down. We're the sons of Yaakov. They're the maidservants. They can bow down. We're the sons of Yaakov. We're not going to bow down. Now, Avol b'nei Leah, the sons of Leah, because they were next, Kisharo li'iman shishtachava, once they saw their mother bowing down, then they bowed down like her, because she was a regular wife. And therefore, if she bowed down, they knew that they had to bow down. And the same thing with Rachel and Yosef. But the maidservants' children felt no need to have to follow their mother's example. They didn't have to follow their mother's example, and they didn't. And the question is why? Their father did. Before anybody bowed down, he bowed down 7 times to Esav. So why, first of all, why didn't they bow down? And in the face of the fact that Yaakov, their father, did, why didn't they? I think there's another question we have to put forth. And that is, basically, by not bowing down, were they endangering themselves and their family to Esav? Esav sees everybody's bowing down, they're not. That's pretty chutzpahdik. It's pretty brazen. Now, I think it's important to point out that there's a Rashi. The Rashi in his comment on when we read the words of the Torah tells us that when Esav and Yaakov embraced, it says Esav saw the family and he said, Mi eila lefanecha, who are these before you? So Rashi brings out a medrash that Esav meant besides who is these people, meaning your family members, he wanted to know about another group of people that he met up that were seemingly part of Yaakov's camp. Because Rashi brings out a medrash that says that Esav and his men, as they're approaching Yaakov, met up with groups of angels. And one group of angels kept pushing them around and saying to them, who are you? And they said, we belong to Esav. So then the angel said, Haku, haku, beat them, beat them. The Elu Aimim Hanichu. Now a different group of angels were saying, leave them be. Yitzchaku, Esav is the son of Yitzchak. That didn't make a difference to them. Beat him, get him. Ben B'nai Shel Avram, who is the grandson of Abraham. They didn't care, didn't make a difference to them. Then they said he's Yaakov's brother. Oh, if so, all right, we'll let you go. So Esav basically said to Yaakov, who are these people that gave us this hard time? Now, if according to this, I would say that this contributed to the fact that Esav didn't harm Yaakov because he knew that he already got a warning from these angels. So Esav has good reason not to harm Yaakov. And maybe we can say, therefore, by not bowing down, they weren't endangering themselves. It could be, but I think one can argue the other way also. And that is that, acting so brazen to Esav, being so defiant to him, that could tick him off. He was Esav Rasha, was the evil Esav. So again, it would seem that we can argue that they were endangering themselves and their families. So again, why did they do this? Why did they see fit to do this? Why was it so important? So it would seem that although they understood why their Yaakov had bowed down and humbled himself before Esav, they understood that they had to be defiant to Esav. They had to show Esav that we're not afraid of you. We're not. Even in this kind of situation, endangering their lives, we're not afraid of you. We're not afraid of you physically. And even more, there's another way we're not afraid of you. And that's because Esav's threat to Yaakov and his children really has two parts to it, two faces to it. And to appreciate this, we need to go back where Yaakov hears that Esav is coming with 400 men, and he prays to Hashem, and he prays to God to save him. This is Perek Lamed Beis, Pasuk Yud Beis, chapter 32, verse 12. Yaakov says, Hatzileni na, save me, please. Miyad Achim Yad Esav, from the hands of my brother, from the hands of Esav. So the commentary basically asks, why does it say from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esav? Yaakov has one brother, Esav. So why does it say from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esav? Says the Beis HaLevi that Yaakov Avinu's concern with Esav was two things. He could be an Esav. He could be the evil Esav who would want to physically destroy Yaakov out of anger for him, out of anger for taking his blessings. Yaakov's concerned about that. But Yaakov is also concerned about brother Esav. He's also concerned about what if Esav doesn't want to physically annihilate me, but he wants to be my brother, and he wants to be close with me and one with me. Yaakov realizes that that's dangerous too, because if Esav stays too close, that's not going to be a good influence on his children. When Esav actually offers Yaakov, let's go together, let's be together, Yaakov pushes him off. Because Yaakov knows there's two threats from Esav: physical annihilation and spiritual annihilation. Therefore, he says, save me from my brother, save me from Esav. Save me if he wants to kill me by sword or kill me with love. Either way, save me from it. And therefore, the son's defiance towards Esav, showing Esav, we're not afraid of you, is where they say to Esav, you will not physically annihilate us, we're not afraid. And secondly, if you think you're going to spiritually annihilate us, that's not going to happen either. And actually, I would like to add that this is a very relevant message to Esav, because we know that before Yaakov meets Esav, Yaakov wrestles with an angel. And Rashi tells us this is the angel of Esav. And they're wrestling, and the angel can't harm him, can't overcome him. So what does the pasuk say? This is Lamed Beis Chaf Vav 32:26. The angel saw that he could not overpower him. And he touched him at his kaf yerechai, at the socket of his thigh. And it gave way, and he became a limp from it. So Esav couldn't overcome Yaakov, but he touched him by the thigh, by the hip socket, or whatever the way to translate it, and Yaakov was injured. The commentaries say that the meaning behind touching Yaakov by his thigh and damaging him there was that the angel of Esav could not overcome Yaakov himself. Yaakov was too holy. But touching him by the thigh was a symbol of touching him by his children. That Esav may not be able to do any damage to Yaakov, but he will be able to do damage to his children. And that can mean physically and, again, spiritually. And therefore, the children are saying to Esav that although you did hurt our father by his thigh, although you did show that you will have some kind of ability to affect Yaakov's children, just know there will always be Yaakov's children who will stand up to you and to any way that you try to hurt us, physically or spiritually, physically when possible. But we know that our main issue with Esav, our main battle with Esav is spiritual. And although spiritually by touching Yaakov by the thigh and hurting him there, that was a symbol that he will have effect on Yaakov's children spiritually. Yaakov's children say to him, don't be too overconfident about that. Yaakov will always have children that will be in defiance of you. And this really fits in to another theme that the Ramban Nachmanides points out at the beginning of the parsha. Ramban points out at the beginning of the parsha that this encounter, this episode of the Esav encountering the Yaakov, is meant to teach us a number of different lessons. One of those lessons are that whatever took place between Yaakov and Esav will take place between Yaakov's descendants and Esav's descendants. This episode between Yaakov and Esav is a sign, is a prophetic vision as to what will be the future between these two nations. Our Gullus, our exile called Gullus Edom, the exile of Edom. Edom, Rome, descendants of ancient Romans, descendants of Esav. They destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash. It's in their exile that we are in and waiting for Mashiach to come take us out from. And although the ancient Romans are gone, and it's descendants of other people that we have to primarily deal with, the Gullus, this exile, is always called the exile of Edom, the Roman exile. This exile always has the imprint of Esav. It always has the influence of Esav in it. And therefore, all generations are considered Esav's descendants. And in this context, this episode between Yaakov and Esav is the key of how we have to figure out how to do it Esav for all generations. If so, we can apply this here too, as I just said. Yaakov's sons are telling Esav that we're not afraid of you. We will stand up to whatever way you try to negatively affect us. And that's not only going to be us, that's going to be all generations. All generations, even if it's dangerous, will stand up to you. And that is the Hanukkah story. The story of Hanukkah is how the descendants of Yaakov, in the darkness that they found themselves, there was seemingly no hope for them to be able to free themselves from the Greeks, to be able to go back to being the Jewish people that they wanted to be. It was impossible for them to be able to do anything about it. But a few righteous Chashmonaim, a few righteous Kohanim, they decided they're going to stand up. And true, this is before Edom. This is before Esav. But at the same time, it's that lesson. It's that power that was put into the descendants of Yaakov. They will stand up to their enemies when their enemies are trying to destroy them, as the Avarim, the Greeks, tried to destroy us spiritually. They will stand up to them. They will not be afraid. And they will be saved, just as Yaakov was saved from Esav. This is what they were trying to do. This is what they're trying to convey to Esav and to us for all generations. That when we have to face Esav, the threat of Esav can be threatening us. He can be trying to rob us of our Judaism, rob us of being the servants of Hashem that we're meant to be. He could do it to us, threatening us with death if we don't take his orders, as was happening in the Hanukkah story. And it also means that even when they're not threatening us with weapons or with swords, but they threaten us with their influence, with their way of life, we will be ready to stand up to them, which is also part of the Hanukkah story. It wasn't just about national freedom. They didn't even get that by the time the Hanukkah miracle took place. It took many years after that for them to be free of Greek domination. But the battle was mainly a battle for the soul of the Jewish people. And that is what the children of Yaakov were showing Esav directly and for all generations. We will not cower before you. We represent tahara. We represent purity. You represent impurity, tuma. Tahara will stand up to tuma. Purity will stand up to impurity and will not be afraid to do that. Now, another interesting point is that okay, now we've covered Yaakov's children. Why did they do it? They did it even possibly, knowing that they could tick off Esav, but they were ready to show him they felt this is what they had to do to Esav. They had to do it for Esav, to do it for us, for all generations. But what about Esav? When Esav saw this, do we know it? We don't find any reaction from him. He doesn't, again, if it's possible that he could have gotten angry at this and reacted, he didn't. Is there something in that? And perhaps, again, there is something in that. And that is that when we show Esav that we're not afraid of him, when we show him that we are proud to be the Jews who we are, and will stand up for that, he will respect us for that. If he sees that we are coming as the force of purity in this world to combat impurity, there will be times that he will respect us for it. He will show us respect. And this, again, can be a very important lesson when we're dealing not so much with a physical threat, because even then there are many stories of when they were physically threatening us, they were still impressed with our strength of spirit, our devotion, our dedication to Hashem. But again, very much in a context of living amongst the nations of the world, living amongst the descendants of Esav in spirit, where we find ourselves in situations where we need to stand as proud Jews and do what we have to do, even though we can be very uncomfortable. There are many people people still who every Friday have to leave work early because it's Shabbos. And they clearly will encounter some people who will not appreciate that. But they will also encounter people who do appreciate it. And that was also a lesson. This is also part of this lesson for all generations, which actually I should have mentioned before. The Ramban in the beginning of Bereshis uses the term Masa Avos Simulabanim. What happened to the fathers is a sign for the generations. Esav's non-reaction to what these defiant sons did was a way of Hashem showing us that Esav, even when he seemed to have the power to react, he's not. He's not. He's going to respect you. Or it's a sign that you'll be okay. Hashem will take care of you. Even when it seems uncomfortable, it seems scary, it seems that we'll be threatened by Esav in some way at different levels, nonetheless, we'll be okay. We'll be okay because Hashem will deliver us in many different ways. And one of those ways could very well be that he will respect us for being dedicated as we are. I just heard today a very beautiful story. Recently, a very great Rabbi David Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, passed away. Rabbi Feinstein was one of the leading halachic authorities in the world. Passed away about a couple of weeks ago. And I heard a story that involved him. I'm going to use this story for what we're talking about. The story is about